Hi there, thank you for joining me on FernCrafts. I'm Christine and I welcome you to my channel. I really do appreciate your comments and I wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for those. Today it's going to be a little DIY and this has been a long time coming because I've mentioned it in many of my comments to some of you, and I believe somebody asked me recently, so have you mounted your orchids? And yes, I have, and I've just been waiting for some results to show you so that I, not just to show you, but so that I would know as well that it works. And so today I do have some tips to share with you, as well as a little DIY on how to go ahead and mount your orchids. Now, I was inspired by Rick L, and if you have not seen any of his videos, I can't imagine that you have not, but if you haven't, please do check it out. He's got lots and lots of videos on, and he makes it sound so simple and easy on how to look after orchids. What I was really inspired about was how well his orchids do when they're mounted. And mine here, it's just, I don't have any fancy driftwood like Rick does, but it was an idea that I borrowed from him, or inspired by his mounting, that I used and did a little DIY with one of my orchids. This was a Dendrobium that I didn't know if, I don't have a label for it, it's a no ID, but I've had it for a while and it seemed like it was dying. It started to yellow out at the tips, but I just didn't have the heart to throw it away. So my husband got me a piece of wood and just wrapped some sphagnum moss over it, tied it up basically at some points, and hung it up, and it seemed to work. You can see that it put out a keiki and lots of roots have come out of it. It does need maybe a little bit more sphagnum moss over the roots to give it more moisture, but it's doing fantastic. And just about a week ago we took it out, and now it's outside and it's still doing well. So it's very basic at that point, but I've upped my game a little bit since then, and I've also learned a few things and made it to look a little bit prettier. So I have here a smaller piece of wood because I realized that you don't really need such a big piece of wood. It's a little how do you say, not very pretty to look at, but it served the purpose at that point. So I'm not gonna take the orchid off anytime soon. It'll probably be there for a while. But here I have a small piece of wood, and these are like scraps that you can get even from like the hardware store, and usually they're willing to give them off for free. So, but this was just a piece that we had lying around the house. I also have some ties here, some longer ties as well as some smaller ones. The sizes, I would say this is probably about 4 inches and this is double that, so almost double that, so maybe 8. Yeah, around that. And this was like a huge packet of them. I got 120 of them in a packet of different sizes, and that was from the dollar store. This is a little piece of mesh that I have, and it's called plastic chicken wire, and you can also get it from the hardware store like Home Depot or somewhere like that. And I like that it's plastic because it's not going to rust or anything like that, and it's very, very flexible, so it works. And I just cut it with my scissors, just your craft scissors, and it'll work. So I have a piece of that as well. I also have some sphagnum moss that's soaking, and here the star of the show is this Oncidium orchid. It's my dancing ladies that I split in a video a while ago into several pieces, and I had one sitting in some what are these called, hydrogen or clay pellets, and top dressed with some sphagnum moss, and it is doing much better now. You can see that there are new growths here, and it's doing well. It doesn't look that great, but it's doing better, so that's promising. This was odds and ends of it that I didn't know what to do with, but I did have an idea that I do want to mount the orchid, so I plopped it in here with just some sphagnum moss, and it's not, you know, it's not stuck in or anything, it's just sitting there in the sphagnum moss. So I'm going to take it out, and that is what we're going to be mounting. There's probably 2 or 3 pieces in here, so let's find out. You can always turn the wood to see which is a prettier side, I guess. I like that there's some rough edging on here. And there. I will get my husband to drill a hole for me on the top after I've done the mount. And it should be fine. If you haven't noticed, most of these roots are dead. So I'm going to clean up some of that as well. And look for any new roots. Like there's a new growth right here. There's some new growth here, here. So definitely want to keep those on the outside and not facing the wood. So once I clean it up, I'm gonna get back to you. Okay, so next thing what I would do is just take your chicken wire and make sure you have enough to wrap around. And if I have more than enough here, but what I am going to do is just trim it so that the ends meet. And so just about, even if it's a little less, it might work. It'll be fine as well. So yeah, I'm going to trim that off, and then just right along this line here, and I should be fine. And now after placing the orchid, I just did like a trial run. It looks like this is too wide for me. I'm just going to cut it down the center because I don't need it to be so wide, and I'll explain a little on that when I get to that part. So yeah, I'm just going to cut down the chicken wire to size now. I'm going to position the orchid so that it is maximum on the board, and I figured that this was a nice way to do that. The reason being is these are the older pseudobulbs, and they're not going to be putting out roots. The roots are going to be coming out of the new tips or the growing leads of the orchid, which is here and here. I haven't seen any on those. So if I position it like this and put on some sphagnum moss here and here, I'm thinking that that would work, and I could do 2 bands of it just to tie it back, and the orchid would be mounted like this. How I hang it up, then I can determine where I want the hole to be, so the hook can go through, and I'm thinking I could even put it there. Alright, so the next thing what I'm going to do is put some sphagnum moss on. And once I have it in place, and just bear with me while I do this, I've drained all of the water out of the sphagnum moss, and just it's still damp but not soaking wet, and it's easier when it's damp to work with it. And I'm just taking out any twigs or things you have in there. So just a handful, you don't need a lot, and I would just place it like that and thin it out as I need, but I want to be careful not to cover this growing tip. Okay, and then again, so you don't need a lot of sphagnum moss either. It's just, I'm just going to move it up a little bit so this can get on. And once you tie everything back, it'll like flatten out a bit, which is what I'm hoping. Okay, so next thing is to put the chicken wire across. Okay, so I've done one side here just to make it easier for me, and now I'm working on the other side. So just to place a little bit of sphagnum moss, and that's only to give moisture to the growing tips. And if you water your orchids daily, because they're mounted, they would need to be watered quite frequently, then you don't even need to do this. Like, you don't need to put the sphagnum moss as much as I've done. And it's soft so it doesn't hurt your orchids too much. Okay. I just have to be careful with that. There. So basically pull it to the back, position it, and then if I flip it on the other side, you can see what I've done with the top two ties there. And I've just used the smaller ties, they seem to work. Going through this and putting it through and tightening it. Simple as that. And love the ties for this purpose. And what I've done with one of my other orchids is after I mounted it, this gap here in where the ties have gone through is really handy to put your label in. Obviously for this orchid I don't have a label, it's just my no ID Dancing Ladies. So if I wanted to make a label, that's where I could hang it. And just give it a nice tight. Make sure your orchid is secure, which it is on that side, and it has some sphagnum moss. Obviously some of it's not going to stay there, it's going to fall out, but if you put in some bigger pieces, once it catches root, it'll be fine. There, that's that. And the last thing I'm going to do, it's a mess here, okay, is just trim these back a little bit, just to neat it up. And once I put the hole in there to hang up the orchid, it's done. So there you go, folks. Mounted my Dancing Ladies no ID today, and it's as simple to do. I'm sure you can find some of these material just lying around at home. You don't need to use the chicken wire. You could even use the ties to just hold them back if you have longer ties and a smaller piece of wood. So I hope for those of you who were anxious to know what I did with these orchids, here is one thing I've done. The other is that I have it in the clay pellets, and that seems to be working too. But I think these orchids do very well if they're mounted. So thanks again for watching, and for those of you who haven't done so already, do subscribe and hit that little notification bell so you'll be the first to know when I upload a video. Thanks again, and until next time, enjoy your orchids. Bye-bye.